Hey, welcome back to our chapter reflections on the Spirit of the Disciplines by Dallas Willard. My name is Meshach Canyon, and in this video, I'll be offering a short reflection on chapter 6. I'm going to be trying to keep these videos to around 10 minutes from now on. That means, especially for these reflections, I'm going to have to do a better job at capturing the big ideas in each chapter. And especially as the chapters get longer, I'm really going to have to do a better job of doing that. So if I miss something that you think is integral to this chapter, please let me know in the comments section and we can have a conversation about it there. So here are the three main ideas that I thought captured the essence of chapter 6. The first idea is that biology includes the spiritual life. The second is that a person is the same as their body. And the third focuses on how the body is a battlefield, so to speak. So let's go ahead and jump right into the reflection and look at this chapter through these three main ideas. So number one, biology includes the spiritual life. For those that don't know, the word biology simply means the study of life, not the study of physical life, but the study of life in general. Now, unless you went to a Christian school, and perhaps even if you went to a Christian school, I bet that when you took biology, the subject matter didn't include anything at all about the spiritual life. One of the main reasons for this is because it's been placed in the category of one of the natural sciences, which includes physics and chemistry, geology, and biology. And these only focus their studies on the physical universe, or what can be known through the senses that we have, as it were. Now, there's nothing wrong with a discipline that focuses explicitly on the physical aspects of our universe or our bodies. A lot has been discovered because brilliant women and men have devoted themselves to these disciplines. But where the problem emerges is when they begin to define life based off of what they study, even though their study is exclusive. It would be like me studying classical music for years and then defining music by what I've discovered through my studies. I'd say something like music involves a piano, a score, and whatever else might be distinctive to classical music. Well, if I did that, that would exclude many of the genres that could also be rightly classified as music. That's what I think has happened to the definition of biology. Since it's focused exclusively on the parts of biology that are empirical, they've excluded that which is immaterial, but may still fall under the category of being alive. This kind of thinking has not only led to the growth of atheism, but it's also led to a misunderstanding of the role of salvation by Christians who also see spiritual life as something that's completely different than biological life. So what Willard is suggesting in this chapter is that while biological life as we know it may be different from spiritual life, the difference is in degree, not in kind. So he quotes a man named Abraham Maslow who said, "The so-called spiritual or higher life is on the same continuum with the life of the flesh or of the body, i.e. the animal life, the lower life. The spiritual life is part of our biological life. It is the highest part of it, but yet part of it." I think this understanding that reconnects spiritual with biological could help us see how spirituality is not something for the religious guru who wanders around in the forest contemplating the meaning of life, but it's for everyone. For everyone has a spiritual life. To be truly alive, therefore, would mean more than that one's heart is pumping blood through their body, but it would mean that one's spirit is governing and fulfilling one's life. This is the way of full integration of life that God intended. So we must see that biological life includes spiritual life. So that was point number one. Point number two is that a person is the same as their body. Now, this may seem like a no-brainer to some people, but perhaps not in the way that Willard is suggesting. For there are people who live for the body and so identify with their body that they worship things like youthfulness and do all kinds of ridiculous things in order to make sure they look forever young and therefore maintain their body. There are also people in most every religion, including Christianity, that see the spiritual and immaterial as being the real stuff of life, and the body as being the baggage that we're forced to carry until we're freed from it by death. These two perspectives are extremes that miss the point and therefore miss out on the glorious purpose of our bodies. So here Willard endeavors to show us how being embodied is one of the primary blessings of God to humanity. Unlike the angels who are not embodied like we are, our embodiment is what uniquely suits us to be the kinds of creatures God created us to be in ruling this world that he created. So a person is the same as their body in that it is through the body that a person comes to know everything that they might know. And it's also through the body that a person is known by anybody. Think about it. Think about a person that you love. And I'm not just talking about their looks, but consider their mannerisms, their voice, the way they move, where they're from, etc. All these constitute a bodily kind of knowledge that helps you define their personhood, that helps you define what they're like. And this is a gift of God to human beings. So the body is not something that's to be despised or viewed as a hindrance, nor is it to be worshipped as ultimate, but is to become an ally with the Spirit in enabling the person to live a wholesome life before God. All this being said, as we arrive at the third point, which is the body is a battlefield, this is something you'll likely know by experience if you're currently attempting to live your life for God. If you're not currently attempting to live your life for God, then you're right now living for the body. And I mean no offense by this, but your conflict is with God, as it says in Romans chapter 5. But for those who are attempting to live for God, your conflict is with the body. The reason for this is not because the body's bad, but because there are powers located within the body that, in a fallen human being, are opposed to God. These habits or powers are known as the flesh. Now stick with me here because I want to explain the difference between the body and the flesh. Flesh, as Willard says, rarely refers to the merely physical substance that makes up the parts of the body. It's generally spoken of in the Bible as something that's active, a specific range of powers that's embedded within a body of a specific type. In other words, flesh represents the natural powers that are inherent in every living creature. So it's the powers of flesh that enable humans to do things like walk and talk and socialize and build, etc. These powers are given to human flesh by God, powers that can be used in cooperation with him or apart from him. Thus, a person doesn't have to be a committed disciple of Jesus in order to learn math. No, the natural powers given to us by God enable us to do that if we choose to, whether we love God or not. But here's where the conflict comes in. Apart from God, a person totally relies on their flesh. They see their flesh as ultimate. They boast in their wisdom. They rely on their strength and the riches that they use their natural powers to secure from themselves. This is the condition of the person apart from God. Their flesh is the organizing and animating power of their life. But after this person becomes a child of God, they no longer live according to their fleshly powers. They no longer see that as ultimate, but now they see God as ultimate and they live for God. They begin realizing the truth of Paul's proclamation, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Not through my flesh, but through Christ who strengthens me. But as this new realization settles in, it creates a royal battle within the flesh, because the habits of unrighteousness located within the flesh, they got there progressively. They were learned through repetition and experience. As the Apostle Paul said in Galatians 5:17, for what the flesh desires is opposed to the Spirit, and what the Spirit desires is opposed to the flesh. For these are opposed to each other to prevent you from doing what you want. And just because a person submits to God, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll no longer have any tendencies towards sin in their body. Sometimes there are miraculous deliverances, and I've heard of many myself. But in many cases, the person who is addicted to managing their reputation, for example, will still be addicted to managing their reputation after they become a Christian. But after they become a Christian, now is when the battle begins. Because now they believe that the responsibility for managing their life belongs to God. But their flesh still has the learned habits trapped within it. And thus the progression known as sanctification begins in earnest. Hence the disciplines for the spiritual life. See, the habits of unrighteousness were introduced to the flesh under the power of sin, and they'll be replaced by habits of righteousness through the grace of God that comes through the disciplines for the spiritual life as the Holy Spirit works within a person. See, it's the flesh that is to be redeemed and placed in proper subordination to the Spirit so that the person alive to the Spirit can begin living a wholly integrated life under God. This is why it's so important what Peter said on the day of Pentecost when he stood up and recalled that old prophecy that says, "In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh." See, the battle's located there within the body, and there we will experience God's complete redemption. So let me just give a brief recap of what I took from this chapter. Number one, biology must include the spiritual life, for the spiritual life is the highest form of life for human beings. Number two, a person is their body because a person can only know and be known through their body. This is why our bodies are a specific gift to us from God. And number three, the body becomes a battlefield because the powers of the flesh that once governed our lives are dethroned and replaced by the power of the Spirit. And through the wise use of disciplines of grace, we replace habits of unrighteousness with habits of righteousness. Well, that's the best I can do for now. The last thing I'll say is that as Willard finishes explaining the role of the body in our salvation and sanctification, he'll shift towards explaining how certain spiritual disciplines can help us towards that end. But first, he's going to give us an example of how that redemption plays out through the life of someone who seriously practiced these disciplines in the manner that Jesus did, namely the Apostle Paul. So look for that in my next reflection on chapter 7. And until then, I'm praying for you. Please continue praying for me too, and remain in the love of God, friends. Peace and goodness.